Shalom, shalom, shalom. All praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, which is to say in the Paleo Hebrew, Yahweh, which is the name of our Heavenly Father, meaning He is, Bahashem, meaning in the name, Yahweh Shai, meaning He is our salvation, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus a so-called black man, okay? And this is, a lesson on, the speckled birds, because the person you see on the screen, if you just saw at the grocery store or in a doctor's office, you will perceive this person as an Edomite. But in all actuality, this is a Jake, okay? Just by appearances alone, you will perceive this individual as an Edomite, a so-called white person, okay? But as we're going to play the story, it turns out that her and her brother are actually Jake's. Now, as far as her children go, I don't know, because they didn't go into too much details about you know her husband or whoever she had the children's with. But by the look of it, it looked like she may have had these children's with another Edomite. So those children would be considered a Edomite. But her and her brother are Jake's, okay? Even though they look like Edomites, all right? So let's let this play. So, you know, her as a so-called black woman, she went out and I guess married a so-called white man and had children, okay? Now, those children that she had was by a Edomite or so-called white man. So those children are so-called white, okay? But her and herself, she is a so-called black woman, She may not look black, but she is indeed a Israelite, okay? So you cannot judge by appearance alone. And let's get that, okay? This is the book of St. John, chapter 7, and verse St. John 7, and I believe it's 24. It's like it. St. John 7 and 24. It reads, "Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment," okay? So you can't go by looks alone, okay? Because if you go by looks alone, you will perceive this individual as a so-called white lady, okay? But in all actuality, she's a so-called black woman, all right? Although she do not look black, but she is, okay? And you don't go by color, okay? It's by your lineage, okay? So she would be considered a so-called black woman, all right? So you can't look and just judge by color alone, because those that you think are so-called black can actually be, so-called white. And those that you perceive to be white or so-called white can actually be so-called black, all right? And we use the word so-called because, we know according to the Bible that there is no such thing as color in the Bible. There's lineage or nationality. So we identify with Esau and Jacob. Those of you that, tuning in for the first time may not know who Esau and Jacob is. But, Esau is the progenitor of the so-called white race or the Europeans. And Jacob is the progenitor of, the so-called blacks or, what we call today as African Americans, Haitians, so-called Haitians, Jamaicans, and then you have the northern kingdom as well. The so-called Latinos and so-called Native Americans of the indigenous people. Okay, and this just goes to tell you, you can't put a, what's the word? You can't put a. I'm trying to find a word. I guess you can't judge a book by its cover, pretty much. All right, because you got Hispanic people that look white too, but in actuality, they are Jake. Okay, so-called black person, because you can't label something by color alone. Okay, and that's what Esau wants. Esau wants confusion, so he wants these colors to be identified as race. But no, we have to go by what the word says. Okay. So yes, this lady is or would be labeled a so-called black woman, all right? Although she do not look black, but her father as we're gonna go in, go in as we go down the video a little bit later, you're gonna see that her father would be a so-called black man. All right. Well, her father, Slaki, let me rephrase that. Her father's father, so her grandfather on her father's side was a so-called black man, but her father perceived to look as white as well. Why? Because his grandmother or his mother was white, Caucasian, European, and his dad was black. You see? So you have to trace it down the lineage, of your father. All right. So let's let it get back and play, and we'll interject. Now you could kind of see that her mom looks a little bit, I guess you could say similar to a so-called, what we say today as a red bone or fair, you know. You could kind of see the phenotypes in her mother's face, but like I said, you can't go by looks alone, okay? You have to go by the spirit, okay?
Dad, he has German, Irish, white.
And you see that's her dad. Now you would look at him and say that's got to be a Edomite. You see? Just off the looks alone, you will see, hey, that's got to be an Edomite. But as she's finna explain, she's gonna say that his mom was German, Irish, and white, and his dad was black. Okay, so therefore he would be a so-called black person and making her, which is his daughter, a so-called black person as well. Okay, so we may have to skip back a little bit so you can get it in its entirety. And one more thing I want to say, a lot of these Bible Belt states like Mississippi, hey, a lot of those people that you perceive to be white are so-called white Edomites are actually Jakes. Okay, got to keep that in mind too. All right, as the video opened up and it said it.
Was a white woman, and
you see, his dad was a colored man. Okay, showing you that what he would be considered, an Israelite. All right. So that's why, hey, when these people come up to the camps, you have to move according to the spirit. You can't go you can't go off the flesh, okay? Because you got some Israelites that perceive individuals to be Edomites and what? Make them, bow down to the ground and kiss their boots, okay? And you could be offending a little one of Yahushua, okay? That could be an elect that you telling to kiss your boot, okay, and lick the dust off your boot. All right. That's why you got to move accordingly. You got to move according to the spirit. All right. You can't be going by just how you feel, because how you feel lead you to doing things like that. All right. Now that's a brother right there. That's a Jake. That's a Jake right there. Look at it. Okay. That's a Jake. All right. You may have somebody in the camp, classifying that as an Edomite, and make them bow down and kiss their boot. All right. That's why you have to move according to the spirit. Okay. You can't go by looks alone because that can mislead you. Okay. This is Jeremiah chapter 12, and let's go to verse 9. Jeremiah chapter 12 and verse 9. And it reads, my heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. Right. So we're going to look like all walks of life. Why? Because pursuant to the curses in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, the 68th verse, we were scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. So we're going to look like the other nations. You see? We're going to look like wherever we were scattered to. All right? Because why? We were going to, mix or spread our seed amongst the women of that nation. Okay? And over time, we were going to take on the looks of the other nations. All right? So it's not far-fetched to believe that, you're going to have Israelites that look so-called white, Israelites that look so-called, Chinese, Israelites that look so-called Indian, like the real Indians with the red dot. You're going to have Israelites that look Hawaii. You're going to have Israelites that even look like those 1948ers, okay? You cannot go by appearance alone. Okay? So let's read that again. Jeremiah 12 and verse 9. It reads, "My heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour." So if you go to Deuteronomy 28, and you're going to see that what? Pursuant to the curses, we would be scattered. And in doing so, we were going to look like some of the other nations. Okay? It's not hard to believe or too far-fetched to believe that. Deuteronomy 28 and 68, and it reads, "And Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, and thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." Right. So it was going to come a time that we were going to be, brought over here into, uh, America, which is, spiritually Egypt, and we were going to be sold. And, in doing so, we were going to take on, heritage of other people, primarily those that brought us over here. All right. So you had slave owners that, brought Israelites, and, for whatever reasons, they could have easily. I remember they had a guy who they had as a slave where his only job was to breed. Okay. And they said he's responsible for breeding over 1,000 children or something like that. So you never know. Okay. Now this is Deuteronomy 28 and 64. It says, "And Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other." So here it goes. This is telling you we were going to be scattered. This is part of the diaspora. Okay. This is why we are in all, walks and all parts of the earth because of these curses. All right. So that's why we're going to look like other nations. So Deuteronomy 28 and 64 says, "And Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." Right? So this is just showing you that, we were going to look like those speckled birds, because if you look at a speckled bird has different types of, colors and shapes on his feathers. Okay. So we were going to look like other nations. So it's no big deal, or no, it's not far-fetched to believe that you're going to have people that you perceive to be Edomites are actually Jakes. Okay. And vice versa. This is Roberta's daughter. Okay. Roberta is the woman to the left, So this is her daughter. And Roberta, which I believe, according to her, which said a lot of the so-called black kids was marrying the white kids. So I believe Roberta, which was a so-called black woman, she married a white man, therefore making her daughter a so-called white woman. Okay. So now this woman right here, she would be considered, a so-called white woman. Okay. And how so? Let's read it. Numbers 1 and verse 18. And it reads, "And they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month. And they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers." You see? So according to the Bible, you declare your pedigree by the house of your families, by your father. Okay? So this woman right here, if it holds up to be that Roberta, had her with a so-called white man, then she's right by proclaiming that she's a so-called white person, because she is. Okay. Now Roberta, it's a different story, because Roberta dad's dad was a so-called black man, or how she said a colored man. Okay. But this lady right here, now she is an Edomite. Because why? Roberta probably went and married a what? A so-called white man, because that was the thing that they was doing back then, she said. A lot of the colored people were marrying, so-called white people. Now, if Roberta was black and she married, let's say if Roberta was Robert and he married a so-called white woman, then this child right here would be a so-called black man. Okay? So let's read it one more time. Numbers 1 and 18. And it reads, and they assemble all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers. You see? Their fathers. That's how you declare your pedigree. Okay, it's not by your mom, it's by your father. There's no such thing as mixed race. Okay, that's a concept that Esau Edom came up with to throw people off. Okay, there's no such thing as mixed. All right, you have to get that through your head. All right, it goes on to read, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward by their polls. So that's how you see whether or not who you are by your father, by the house of your father. And you got a point, you know, but you stepped out and you went and got you a so-called white man, you know, allegedly, because it doesn't say that in this interview, but that's what she said. So by that merits, you know, she is a so-called white woman. This is Job 8 and 8. It reads, for inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to search of their fathers. So this is why you see when individuals come up to the camp or they come up and, you know, we engage with them, we try to ask, you know, what is your father? Okay. So we can see how to deal with you accordingly. All right. So if you say your father is so-called white, then we know exactly who you are. You're an Edomite. Or if you say your father is so-called Slakia, Chinese, then we know you're a Moabite, you know, or Indian, we know you're Elamite, okay? So we try to engage to get a, you know, feeling of exactly who you are according to the scriptures, all right? So let's read that again. Job 8 and 8, for inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. So we ask that. You know, you may see if you watch any of the Israelite videos, whoever that come up to the camp or come up to the, camp, they may say, what is your father? Okay. You know, as far as you know, all right? And they say a so-called black man or African American or a so-called Puerto Rican or so-called Colombia, you know, and we will, you know, address them accordingly, okay? But you can't just go by looks alone because you will have an Edomite that you think is an Edomite, but in actuality is a Jake. Kiss your boots, okay? And you going off, all right? Yeah, because you, you know, are black, but she isn't, okay? Your dad, as you said, his dad was a colored man. Now her dad, which you had intercourse with, which was a so-called white man. So she is right about that. She is a so-called white woman. Okay? Let's go to Matthew 18 and verse 6. It reads, but whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Okay? So you have, like I said, those that are perceived to be Edomites or Elamites or Moabites come up to your camp, and just because, you know, that's what they look like on the outward appearance, you know, you didn't do your due diligently and, you know, inquire of their fathers and see just exactly who they were, okay? And in doing so, you know, you may have told them to what? Let's read it. Because this is where they go, you know. Isaiah 49 and verse 23. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 49 and verse 23. And it reads, and kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face towards the earth, and look up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am Yahweh, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. Okay? So you have some camps, you know, that bring this verse out, this precept out when they have what they perceive to be a so-called white woman or white man or Asian woman or Asian man or any other race, they'll tell them if you feel sorry, then you need to get down on your knees and what? Kiss my boot, okay? Not knowing that that could actually be an Israelite, and even worse, Israelite that is of the elect. Okay, and what do we read in Matthew 10 and verse 6? It's like in Matthew 18 and verse 6. But whosoever shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, right? Because if they believe in Yahushua, they bow and obey the word. And now you, as someone that's supposed to be upholding the word, has now offended them by making them kiss your boot, thinking that they were another nation, but in actuality, they were of the same stock as you. And furthermore, you never know if you are of that stock. Speaking of Yasharallah, Israel, okay? So that's why you have to be humble in this thing, okay? You can sometimes you get the spirit to know, hey, this is a heathen or this is a Jake, okay? That's why you have to try the spirits, okay? That's why you have to try the spirits, all right? See how they interact with you, see how they interact with the word, ask about their fathers, inquire about their fathers, and then you act accordingly, okay? But just going by off somebody how they look and telling them to bow down and kiss your boot, hey, you never know who you telling to do that to, okay? That's why you gotta, move according to what the word says, all right? So let's let it play out, and then we'll probably close up. Well, I hate to tell you, hey, that's not a black woman, man. If you lay down with a so-called white man, you are the seed of your father. Okay, that's just exactly who she is, and she knows it. She understands it. Okay, it's in her spirit. She understands. She knows that she's an Edomite. Okay. Now this is a Jake. All right. You may look at her and say she looks like an Edomite, but this is a Jake. All right. Her father's father was a colored man. Okay. As far as we know. All right. Now, if it goes back that his father's father was another Edomite, then that's something different. But as far as we know, according to her and her lineage, that she said her father was a colored man, then that makes her a what? A so-called black woman or a color woman.
I went.
And like we went through, it's not your mother that carries the seed, okay? Now she does carry the seed, but she doesn't have the seed in her because why? She doesn't have testicles, okay? She has a womb which carries the seed that comes from the testicles, but it's your father who has the seed that impregnates your mother, okay? So your mother has nothing to do with your heritage or your lineage, okay? You can take phenotypes from your mother, but your spirit, that spirit comes from your father, okay? And that's what our people have to understand, all right? You may look like your mother, you may have phenotypes that resembles your mother, but your spirit comes from your father, all right? So this is the book of 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8, and it reads, be sober, be vigilant. You see, so when we minister in this truth, this word, we have to be sober. We have to be vigilant, and we have to do our due diligence, and inquire and search out the former age and inquire of their fathers, okay? We have to make a informed decision based on the word, not on our feelings, okay? So be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, that's what he wants. He wants you to offend a little one of Yahushua, okay? He wants you to perceive every person that you see by their skin color as what they are, okay? He wants you to tell them to kiss the boot, in actuality, that person that you told to kiss a boot was from the same stock as you, okay? That person could have been an Israelite, all right? and now you offended a little one of Yahushua, which could have been potentially the elect or is of the elect. And it says what? It would be more better if you were tied to a stone and cast into the sea. Roughly paraphrasing it. All right. So that's what the devil wants, because you got to remember, he's the accuser of our brother. All right. He looks for any and everything that he can bring up to the Most High as what? Showing that we're not doing our best down here on this earth. That's why we need to continue to be in slavery and in captivity. Let's go there. Revelation 12 and verse 10, I believe. Revelation 12 and 10, and it reads, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our power and the power of his Hamashiach. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our power day and night." You see? So this is all Esau does, man. He looks for ways to have us to go off so that he can accuse us and bring forth, bring and bear forth, false accusations, man. And then if we go off, he has a valid point. You see? So that's why he comes up with ideas like mixed people, to throw it off where you can't judge, according to the Bible. Okay, he wants you to make false accusations, all right, so that he can accuse us and say that, hey, Father, or he says, whoever he calls on, because we know he doesn't believe in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, but he makes false accusations against us, okay, that, hey, they don't adhere to the word, they don't test the spirit, they go by looks alone, okay, and in doing so, hey, that's why we in the predicament that we in, because why? We not supposed to listen to our own understanding. We're supposed to trust in Yahweh and lean not onto our own understanding. Proverbs 3 and verse 5. So that's why in 1 Peter 5 and 8, it's important that we be sober, okay? And you can't be sober if you're not adding things up and measuring things against this truth, this word. So 1 Peter 5 and 8, it's like it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour." Okay? And if he can bring up charges on you that stick because, you are making false accusations, or not, rightfully dividing the truth, then he will do so, okay? He will do so. He will allow things like mixed people to be stumbling blocks for some of us, okay? He will allow, like I said, he will allow mixed race to be stumbling blocks, where you see individuals that say they got so-called white boys in their camps, or they got so-called white boys teaching, okay, not knowing and not understanding that just because they look white or so-called white, that they could be, a so-called Puerto Rican or so-called black or so-called Dominicano or what have you, okay? You cannot go by looks alone. It's the lesson, all right? So we're going to close out with that and pray someone was edified through this lesson. And until the next time, if it be the Lord's will, stay strong, stay in the faith. We almost home. Shalom. Peace.